The marble floors of the Ashford estate gleamed like cold mirrors, reflecting the storm brewing inside the grand dining hall. Crystal chandeliers shimmered overhead, scattering fractured light across the long mahogany table where the Ashford family sat like a silent tribunal. Outside the tall windows, the sky hung low and gray, as though even the weather sensed what was about to unfold. Elena stood alone at the center of the room. Her fingers were laced together to stop their trembling, but she could still feel the tremor in her pulse. She had walked into this house 2 years ago believing it was the beginning of a life built on partnership and love. She had memorized every corridor, learned every unspoken rule, adjusted her laughter to fit the acoustics of wealth. But in this moment, she felt like an intruder in a museum where she had once been displayed as a prized exhibit. Margaret Ashford rose slowly from her chair. She did everything slowly, strategically, so that attention bent toward her like gravity. The diamonds at her throat caught the chandelier light and flared coldly. "You have embarrassed this family," Margaret said, her voice controlled, precise. "Do you understand what you've done?" Elena swallowed. "The investigation cleared me. There was no fraud. The funds were accounted for." "That is not the point," Margaret replied sharply. "Perception is reality. Investors doubt us. Our name is whispered with pity. Because of your little charity experiment." Elena's chest tightened. The charity had not been an experiment. It had been a literacy program for underprivileged children, something she had built quietly, without asking the Ashfords for a single dollar. She had used her own savings, the inheritance her father had given her before the wedding. But when a supplier defaulted and tabloids twisted it into scandal, the Ashfords had panicked, not over truth, but over image. Daniel sat at the far end of the table, fingers steepled against his lips. He hadn't looked at her once since she entered the room. "Daniel," Elena said softly, hoping, still hoping, that he would speak. "You know the truth." He shifted in his seat, eyes flickering toward his mother before settling on the polished wood of the table. "It's complicated, Elena. Complicated." The word felt like a quiet execution. Margaret stepped closer, heels clicking against marble. "You married into this family knowing what it represents. Discipline, reputation, power. And yet you chose to gamble that reputation on a project that yielded nothing but bad press." "It yielded children who can read," Elena replied, her voice steadier now. "It yielded opportunity. It yielded weakness," Margaret snapped. The doors at the back of the dining hall opened, and 2 household staff members entered hesitantly. They looked uncomfortable, eyes lowered. Elena felt a chill crawl up her spine. "Strip her of everything that carries our name," Margaret instructed coolly. "Every symbol." For a second, Elena thought she had misheard. Margaret extended her hand. The necklace. The diamond necklace, an heirloom from the Ashford vault, had been clasped around Elena's throat on her wedding day. Margaret herself had fastened it, smiling for the cameras as if crowning her. Now it was being revoked. One of the staff members stepped forward, hands shaking slightly, and reached for the clasp. Elena closed her eyes as the necklace was removed. The sudden lightness at her throat felt heavier than the diamonds had ever been. "Your jacket," Margaret continued. It was custom designed, bearing a subtle Ashford crest stitched into the lining. A symbol of belonging. Elena slipped it off herself before anyone else could touch her. Finally, Margaret reached toward the golden brooch pinned over Elena's heart. She didn't ask this time. She simply unclasped it with deliberate care. "You are no longer permitted to represent this family in any capacity," Margaret declared loudly, ensuring every servant within earshot absorbed the humiliation. "From this moment, you are Ashford by legal technicality alone." Elena's face burned, not from shame of wrongdoing, but from the cruelty of spectacle. This wasn't discipline. It was performance. "Mother," Daniel said weakly, rising halfway from his chair. "Is this necessary?" Margaret's eyes flashed. "If she wishes to stay, she will earn her place back. Otherwise, she may leave. I will not have fragility contaminating this house." Fragility. Elena felt something inside her harden. She looked at Daniel fully now, searching his face for the man she had once trusted. "Do you agree with this?" Silence stretched between them like a crack in glass. "I think," he said carefully, "that perhaps some time apart would help." There it was. The surrender. Elena nodded slowly. The trembling in her hands had stopped. In its place was a strange clarity. "You don't need to open the door," she said quietly. "I can find it." Margaret's lips curved faintly. "See that you do." Elena turned and walked the length of the dining hall. Each step echoed. No one moved to stop her. No one called her name. Upstairs, she entered the bedroom that had once felt like a shared sanctuary. She didn't touch the silk dresses hanging in the wardrobe or the velvet shoes lined in rows. Instead, she reached to the back corner where she had hidden something long ago, a simple navy dress she had worn before marriage, before galas and boardrooms. She changed without tears. When she descended the staircase again, she carried nothing but her phone and the quiet dignity they had failed to strip. The front doors opened, and cool air rushed in. The sky had darkened fully now, rain beginning to fall in thin silver lines. The estate gates stood tall at the end of the long driveway, iron bars separating the world of Ashford prestige from everything beyond it. As she walked, rain soaked her hair and clung to her dress. She didn't look back. Halfway down the driveway, her phone buzzed in her hand. She stared at the screen for a long moment before pressing call. Her father answered on the first ring. Elena. The steadiness of his voice undid her more than any cruelty had. Dad, she whispered. For a heartbeat, she was no longer a disgraced daughter-in-law. She was simply his child standing in the rain. I'm coming home. There was a pause, not of shock, but of calculation. Of controlled power. Where are you? He asked calmly. Outside. Stay there. The line clicked softly as he ended the call. Elena reached the gates just as a black car turned the corner beyond the estate walls. Not a taxi. A driver she recognized from years ago. The gates opened automatically. She stepped through without hesitation. Behind her, the Ashford mansion stood illuminated against the storm, vast and imposing, and suddenly smaller than it had ever seemed. They had tried to strip her of symbols. They had mistaken silence for insignificance. But as the car door opened and she slid inside, Elena realized something with startling clarity. They had never known who she truly was. And soon, they would. 3 weeks after Elena walked out into the rain, the Ashford name glittered once again beneath crystal chandeliers, this time in the grand ballroom of the Grand Meridian Hotel. The event had been announced as a historic strategic partnership, the kind of phrasing that made investors salivate and competitors uneasy. Gold-lettered banners bore the Ashford crest. A string quartet played near the stage. Champagne flowed as though liquidity had never been a concern. Margaret Ashford stood at the center of it all in a silver silk gown that shimmered like armor. She moved from guest to guest with calculated warmth, her laughter precise, her posture impeccable. If there were whispers about Elena's sudden disappearance, Margaret had drowned them in narrative control. A personal retreat, she had told the press. Young marriages require resilience. The tabloids, always eager for a new angle, had moved on. But beneath the poise, urgency coiled tightly. Ashford Industries was bleeding capital. A risky expansion into overseas manufacturing had stalled. Credit lines were thinning. The partnership announced tonight was not a luxury, it was survival. The representative of Laurent Global Holdings was scheduled to sign at precisely 8 o'clock. Daniel stood near the stage, adjusting his cufflinks for the third time. He had lost weight in 3 weeks. His eyes flicked repeatedly toward the ballroom doors. You look pale, Margaret murmured as she approached him. I'm fine, he replied, though his voice lacked conviction. Are we certain the chairman himself is attending? That is what we were promised, Margaret said coolly. And when a man like Victor Laurent attends in person, it means we are valued. Valued. The word felt fragile. At exactly 8, the quartet faltered mid-note as the ballroom doors opened. Silence rippled outward like a dropped glass. First came security, discreet but unmistakable. Then assistants in tailored suits. And finally, a man whose presence seemed to bend the air around him. Victor Laurent walked with unhurried confidence, silver threading his dark hair, his expression composed to the point of severity. His reputation preceded him, a strategist who acquired struggling empires and rebuilt them, or dismantled them, without sentiment. Beside him walked Elena. A collective intake of breath swept the room. She wore ivory, sleek, minimalist, luminous against the polished marble floors. No ostentatious jewels adorned her, only a single sapphire pendant resting at her collarbone. Her hair fell smoothly over her shoulders. Her gaze was steady, not ashamed, not broken. Margaret's smile froze in place. Daniel felt the floor tilt beneath him. Elena, the word escaped before he could stop it. Elena did not look at him immediately. She walked in step with her father toward the stage, every movement deliberate. Cameras began to flash wildly as recognition spread. Reporters whispered urgently into phones. The narrative had just shifted. Victor Laurent mounted the stage first. Elena remained slightly behind him, not in submission, but in partnership. Good evening, Victor began, his voice smooth yet edged with steel. I understand the Ashford family seeks a capital partnership with Laurent Global Holdings. Margaret recovered enough to ascend the stage, her smile taut. Mr. Laurent, the honor is ours. We are confident this collaboration will be mutually beneficial. Victor regarded her without warmth. I prefer clarity over confidence. Daniel stepped forward. We appreciate your willingness to review our proposal. Victor accepted the leather contract folder from his assistant. He opened it slowly, scanning the pages though everyone present knew such a man never relied solely on a summary. I have reviewed more than your proposal, Victor said calmly. I have reviewed your liabilities. Your cash flow projections. Your private loans. A murmur spread through the ballroom. Margaret's fingers tightened around her clutch. All corporations carry temporary fluctuations. Temporary, Victor echoed. An interesting choice of word for debt that matures in 5 months. Daniel's face drained of color. Victor closed the folder gently. And yet, he continued, financial instability is not what concerns me most. His gaze shifted directly to Margaret. What concerns me is character. The room felt suddenly smaller. 3 weeks ago, Victor said, each word measured, my daughter was publicly humiliated within your home. Stripped of symbols. Cast out under the pretense of preserving reputation. Gasps rippled openly now. Cameras zoomed in. Margaret attempted a brittle laugh. Family matters are often misunderstood. I do not misunderstand, Victor interrupted softly. I understand precisely. Elena stepped forward then, her voice clear and unwavering. You told me perception is reality, she said, meeting Margaret's eyes. Tonight, let's discuss perception. Daniel swallowed. Elena, if this is about reconciliation. It is not, she replied. Victor placed the unsigned contract on the podium. You sought partnership, he said evenly. But partnership implies trust, respect, shared values. Margaret's composure cracked at the edges. Are you suggesting you will withdraw? I am suggesting, Victor replied, that Laurent Global Holdings does not invest in cruelty. The words fell like a verdict. Margaret's voice sharpened. You would jeopardize a mutually profitable arrangement over personal grievance. Victor regarded her with cool detachment. You mistake this for emotion. It is strategy. He nodded to one of his assistants, who stepped forward with a second document. Over the past 72 hours, Victor continued, Laurent Global Holdings has quietly acquired the majority of Ashford Industries' outstanding debt. The ballroom erupted in whispers. Daniel stared at him. Acquired. At market discount, Victor clarified. Through perfectly legal channels. Margaret staggered back a fraction. That's impossible. It is already finalized. Reporters surged closer to the stage, microphones raised. Victor's voice remained calm. As primary debt holder, we are exercising our right to convert debt into controlling equity. The meaning was unmistakable. Ashford Industries would no longer belong to the Ashford family. Daniel's composure shattered. You can't just. I can, Victor replied. And I have. Elena watched silently, not with vengeance blazing in her eyes, but with quiet resolution. This was not rage. It was consequence. Margaret's shoulders trembled. This is retaliation. No, Elena said softly. Retaliation would have been public humiliation. This is restructuring. A flicker of something, perhaps recognition, passed through Margaret's eyes. Victor turned to the audience. Effective immediately, Ashford Industries will operate under new leadership. Existing employees will retain their positions. Ongoing community initiatives will not only continue, but expand. His eyes met Elena's briefly. With particular emphasis, he added, on educational outreach. The implication was deliberate. Applause began hesitantly, from investors who recognized stability when they saw it. Then it grew. Security stepped forward discreetly, positioning themselves near the Ashford family as control of the stage shifted. Daniel looked at Elena one last time. Why didn't you tell me? He asked hoarsely. About your father. She held his gaze without bitterness. You never wanted to know who I was before your name. Margaret opened her mouth to speak again, but no words came. Victor extended his arm toward Elena, not as possession, but as acknowledgement. No one shames my daughter and remains unchanged, he said quietly. Flashbulbs captured the moment, the fall of one dynasty and the quiet ascent of another. As the Ashford family was escorted from the stage amid a storm of questions, Elena felt an unexpected lightness. Not triumph. Not revenge. Release. Outside the ballroom windows, the city skyline glittered against the night sky. 3 weeks ago, she had walked into rain feeling erased. Tonight, she stood in her own light. Victor leaned slightly toward her. Are you satisfied? Elena considered the question carefully. This wasn't about satisfaction, she said. It was about clarity. He studied her for a moment, then nodded. The empire she would build would not be inherited, nor granted through marriage. It would be chosen. And this time, no one would mistake her strength for weakness again.